Hey guys, and welcome to Should You Buy It, where all we do is talk a little bit about the game and tell you whether or not we think it's worth the cost.
Oh shit! I didn't think you could do that.
In this episode, we'll be playing Stranded Deep, the open world survival and crafting game where you will have to fight off not only sharks, but also the sun itself while trapped in the middle of the ocean with nothing but a few coconuts to keep you fed.
Now, the first question that we always cover in these videos is what stage of development is the game in? And in this case, Stranded Deep is currently in full release and available on PC as well as most consoles for $15. And by the way, if you guys do want to help support the channel, you can do so by clicking the join button down below and becoming a channel member for less than the price of a cheeseburger. It also comes with some cool perks, but otherwise, let's stop wasting time and go ahead and jump right into the video.
So what exactly is the game? Well, Stranded Deep is a survival game where you will be constantly fending off not only hunger, thirst, and a variety of sea creatures, but also the sun itself. Now, what I mean when I say the sun itself is heat stroke. Heat stroke, if you can't imagine it, is simply what happens when you stay out in the sun for too long and don't have enough protection from it. The game even has an entire UI system built into your watch to help you monitor your vitals, which include things like your health, water, food, and SPF levels. This watch doesn't just show you your survival levels, but instead also shows you many other things such as your skill levels in crafting, hunting, harvesting, physical, and cooking.
In total, there are 5 different skills for you to level up and master within Stranded Deep. The first is the hunting skill, which will give you extra damage to creatures as it increases in level. Following that are the harvesting and physical skills, which will increase the rate at which you gather resources and the amount of time you can hold your breath while underwater. Following that is cooking, which will increase the amount of food you gain from any food item. Finally, we have craftsmanship, which will act as your unlock system for new recipes. Each of these skills will of course level up whenever you do an activity associated with them, but each one is important and impactful to the game in many different ways.
Now, craftsmanship is going to serve as one of your many different ways to progress throughout the game. This is because craftsmanship essentially serves as one of your limiting factors when it comes to said progression. To give you an example of what I'm talking about, if you want to build a raft with sails and a motor, then you're going to need the craftsmanship level to do so. And while yes, you can theoretically use your small rowable dinghy to get around, it won't be a feasible option to complete the game in. This means you can't realistically progress past the closest islands to your home island without leveling said craftsmanship skill. You also of course have things like the gyrocopter, which are just simply awesome, but not necessarily required for progression.
The second form of progression will come through the game's boss system. You see, there are currently 3 major bosses that you will encounter in Stranded Deep, and while I don't want to spoil them all for you, I'll just say each one is fairly challenging, at least until you find the best strategy to defeat them, at which point they start to become extremely easy. Each of these bosses are also required in order to complete the game and finish the story, but aren't necessarily required if all you care about is simply building up a massive, interesting base and enjoying the world that Stranded Deep itself is. Unless, of course, you just want to have those cool trophies mounted up on your wall.
Stranded Deep does have a storyline, but to be completely honest with you, it's a very short one. I will say the ending was rather interesting, but just take note that if you're playing this game, it's probably not going to be for the story purposes, since the story is really only told to you at the very beginning and the end of the game. With that being said, even without a massive story to give you that driving force in the game, there is still plenty of atmosphere that the game immerses you in. I always felt like I was stranded in the middle of the ocean with no hope of rescue, just like a true island castaway should.
That sense of being stranded and hopelessness that the game's atmosphere brings to the table really helps to immerse you into everything the game has to offer. Sure, some things might break that sense of immersion from time to time, but overall, this game constantly made me want to escape the island nightmare I found myself in. Some examples of this are the little boils that you'll see on your skin whenever you become poisoned, or the fact that there really just isn't a whole lot of UI to block your screen. That's not even to mention that if you have a fear of the ocean like many people do, then you will feel very uneasy whenever you're traveling between islands, as you can't really see the bottom and there seems to always be some kind of shark trying to attack you.
So now let's jump over to the pros and cons section for the video. First up for the pros is that the atmosphere provides the player with a real sense of hopelessness. An example of this is when you get lost, it feels so heartbreaking because it's almost impossible to find your way home in a vast ocean with islands that all just look the same. Next up for the pros is that the UI just felt unintrusive and unique. Having your vitals displayed on a watch, as well as different conditions changing your skin's appearance, felt like a great way to convey information to the player while also not breaking the immersion. Another pro is that the game has some replayability value with the procedural generation and difficulty settings. This means that no playthrough will be exactly the same, and you can always adjust the difficulty if you found your last playthrough to be too easy. And finally for the pros is the fact that very few of the gameplay mechanics are explained outside of how buttons function and how you interact with the world. This may seem bad, but it explains just enough to help you understand the basics of how to play the game and leaves the player to figure out how to solve their own problems.
Now for the cons. First up is that the boss fights really just felt simplistic and rather easy once you learned how to deal with them. Now, what I'm trying to explain to you here is that really every boss fight is done the same way, and I'm not going to spoil that for you. Let's just say it's very easy if you look up the right strategy, whereas if you just jump in the water and go ham on them, there's a good chance you are not going to win, or it's going to at least be significantly more difficult. Following that is that there's just a rudimentary sense to the whole crafting system. Just to give you an idea of what I'm actually talking about here, let's say you decide to build a base. Well, you can either build that base out of really cheap materials like sticks, or you can build that base out of really expensive material like scrap. One is much harder to acquire than the other, yet both serve the exact same purpose and have the exact same value to the player. Neither one will get destroyed by weather, and neither one give you any more benefit than the other does, aside from a cosmetic value. After that is the lack of an in-game map system, and yes, I understand that Stranded Deep is supposed to get you lost. That is a part of the game, and it's supposed to be a whole mechanic that you have to play around. With that being said though, I don't understand why they couldn't put some kind of system in for you to either leave a trail with buoys, or maybe say just go ahead and make your own map out of paper or palm leaves so that you can kind of have some idea as to where you've been and how to get back. A great way that I think they could do this is by simply allowing you to draw your own little bit of a map within some sort of a paint system within the game. I think that would add a lot of immersion, but also add a sense of being able to figure out where you're going and how to get home. That way you're not totally screwed and without any hope, because all you have right now is a compass, and I'm sorry, but that's just not enough. Now, my final con for you guys today is just the simple fact that there is no autosave feature whatsoever. In most games like this, when you go to sleep, it saves the game, and I don't understand why Stranded Deep has made that decision to specifically not allow you to autosave every time you go to bed or some other way. It just doesn't make sense to me in a modern game why you can't have a special save slot for you manually saving and a save slot for autosave, so that they don't have to worry about you accidentally spawning in poisoned and just dying over and over again. Many games have done this, and there's really no reason for Stranded Deep not to also have some kind of autosave feature.
So now it's time for the rating for the game, and when we rate games, we want to get 1 hour of enjoyment out of every $1 that the game costs. So for this game in particular, in Stranded Deep, we would want to get roughly 15 hours of enjoyment out of the $15 cost of the game. And after putting well over 24 played hours into this game, we give it 6 out of 10 potatoes.
Stranded Deep was a game that truly sold us on the idea that we are stranded in the middle of the ocean with no chance of rescue. It gives you such a great sense of immersion, with everything from the soundtracks to the watch all helping to sell you on this harsh reality of the world that you are now in. I do wish that Stranded Deep had a bit more content at the end of the day, but more importantly, that it had some form of navigation or map system outside of a compass. Even with that lack of overall content though, I think many players will find there to be a good amount of replayability value in the game, with the different difficulty options and procedural generation helping to keep things interesting. With all of that being said though, we feel that Stranded Deep is probably worth the cost.
Now before you guys go, thank you so much for watching, and if you did enjoy the video, make sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell for more survival game content and reviews. We just want to quickly shout out our Platinum and above members Jonathan S, Caustic FPV, and Jim Phillips, and if you too would like to help support the channel for less than $1, which is less than the price of a cheeseburger these days, you can hit the join button down below to check out our membership program. Otherwise, thank you so much again for watching, and we'll see you next time.